Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Kisus.
Shalom.
Our one pasuk for this week's parsha, Parshas Ki Tisa, is the second pasuk of the parsha, from which it derives its name. Perek Lamed pasuk Yud Beis, chapter 30, verse 12. Ki Tisa es rosh bnei Yisrael yifkudehem. When you take a census of the Israelite men, according to their army enrollment, if that's what lifkudehem means, v'nasnu ish kofer nafsho l'Hashem bifkodosam. Each shall pay to Hashem an atonement or a ransom for himself on being counted. V'lo yiheh lohem negef bifkodosam, so that no plague may come upon them through their census. Bnei Yisrael are still at the foot of Har Sinai. They have received the Torah. They have received the commandment to construct the Mishkan. Here in the middle of the description of the construction of the Mishkan is this mitzvah to take a census, and there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, and a lot of deep significance behind the different elements of this mitzvah, which I know we're going to get to in the following presentations.
So you translated Ki Tisa es rosh bnei Yisrael to mean when you take a census, when you count the Jewish people. But of course, the lashon, the language, is interesting. It's curious. It's different. It's not Ki Sifkod when you will count. It's Ki Tisa es rosh, which the Or HaChaim says, literally means when you lift up the head of the Jewish people. And the Or HaChaim explains that following the Chet HaEgel, there's some question here about chronology. When exactly does this take place? Chronologically, in the presentation of the Torah, this is happening before the sin of the golden calf, but according to many, this actually took place afterwards. And the Or HaChaim says after the sin with the Egel, the Jewish people were hanging their head low. They were despondent and sad. And this count was meant, Ki Tisa es rosh, to lift up their heads, to lift up their spirits. And one can give, I guess, various different explanations. How is this count designed to do that? How does this count change the attitudes and the outlook of Bnei Yisrael? So there's a very beautiful idea from Rav Zalman Sorotzkin in the Oznaim LaTorah, and he says that the function of this count was to show the Jewish people how small a percentage of Klal Yisrael actually participated in the Chet HaEgel. Chet HaEgel, we know, was 3,000 people were killed in the wake of the Egel, so we can assume that was the totality of the participants. And we could have said, Sorotzkin notes, we could have just said that we know the number of the Jewish people at this point, because we know that they were Shishim Ribo who left Mitzrayim, so we could have subtracted 3,000, and then we didn't need to do this count. But the point is that we did this count to show that the vast, vast majority of the Jewish people were not implicated in the Egel, did not die in the wake of the Egel. And it was a way of saying to the Jewish people, instead of focusing on the minority that did the wrong thing, recognize that the majority is doing the right thing, has done the right thing, and that you can lift up your heads and have a sense of dignity again and a sense of optimism and positivity. And I just think that it's a nice idea because very often, at least as we look outwardly, at other communities, as we look at groups of people, it's very easy to look at a minority and judge the totality of the group. And it's important to recognize that often bad actors or people who represent, let's say, the worst impulses of a community, they're generally the minority. And there's often a much bigger story and a majority that can hold its head high and have that kind of optimism and positivity. So I thought that resonated.
So true. So true. Actually, my heart skipped a beat because I thought you were going to say the idea that I wanted to share. But the observation is the same, but the message is considerably different. And I think the reading Ki Tisa, the observation that this word is rather odd, it's an important question. There's many ways the Torah could have conveyed this idea. And you beautifully pointed out how it relates to the specific context and time of what Bnei Yisrael was experiencing. But I wanted to share something even more, in a certain sense, elementary. And that is that there are times where we encounter groups of people and we have a certain reaction to, oh yeah, I was there and, I was at so-and-so's wedding, and it's hard to imagine like who did I end up talking to? Who was I sitting with? Who did I communicate with? This was an opportunity for Moshe Rabbeinu to have an audience with every single person. And naturally, when someone comes forward and says, here's my contribution, and Moshe looks that person in the eye and says, to scale him, this is going to go towards the operating budget of the Mishkan, the person feels dignity. He's one. He's unique. He wasn't someone at the wedding or just someone who was part of a crowd, but every person could come forward. And how often we don't appreciate the power of our own interactions with others. You don't have to be a celebrity or someone who's well known to make someone else feel good. Just the other day, I walked into a store. There was a girl there who was working with an organization. She had Down syndrome, and she looks at me and she's like, "You're Nechama and Batya's brother." And I felt good. She recognized me. I have twin sisters who are Down syndrome, and this girl knew that I was their brother. It doesn't take a celebrity. It doesn't take a famous person. It could be someone who's friends with my little sisters who happens to have somehow a good enough memory to remember that somehow I am their brother. And she said, "How are they doing?" I walked out of the store. I'm like, it felt nice to be recognized. It felt nice for somebody to know Moshe Rabbeinu took that opportunity, Ki Tisa, to lift up every single person. And, as you framed it in the context where we were struggling with ourselves and our self-image and our importance and our self-worth, it was especially apropos. But I think all of us, if we walk through, walk into a grocery store or walk into a shul at a time where there's a lot of people around, and we take time to greet people in a meaningful way, we don't realize we're giving them a certain energy to be able to continue and lifting them up in the process.
Yeah. It reminds me of a couple things very quickly. It reminds me, first of all, of the bracha, Yisah Hashem panav elecha. We say Hashem should lift up his face, but from here, from Ki Tisa, we see, no, the bracha is that Hashem should pay attention to you, should recognize you directly. And it also calls to mind on Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara that Unasana Tokef is based on, V'chol ba'ei olam yavrun lefanav kivnei maron, right? That each and every person, each and every individual comes before the judge, comes before Hashem one by one. And the Gemara has different ways to explain that, but the general idea is, it's not that Hashem just sits in cold, callous judgment. No. He looks at each and every one of us for a moment. Each one of us have an audience with the Ribono Shel Olam, as it were. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So I also was focused on the understanding of the word of Ki Tisa, Ki Sisa, and actually a little bit similar to what Rabbi Jesus was saying. But it's interesting because the Onkelos translates it as to receive, arei tekabel. And that what the Torah is saying is that when you want to receive, when you want to gather this kind of information, taking a census, you want to receive that kind of report, this is how you do it. That's what Ki Tisa means. But there's a fascinating Medrash Tanhuma that translates the word differently. It translates it more literally, that it means to lift up. Not to count, but to lift up, like Rabbi Goldberg was discussing. But what the Medrash Tanhuma does is amazing. It says that the idea of lifting up means that each person has a certain greatness, a certain stature. Each Jewish person now has a very special mission that they received because we just got the Torah. And so Ki Tisa, we are lifting up, we are recognizing and establishing the special quality of each and every person. And then the Medrash cites two psukim. And I'd never seen this before. When I saw it, it just blew my mind, because the Medrash adds another lesson by pointing to Yosef's interpretation of the dreams of the butler and the baker, because he uses the same language for each interpretation, but obviously the interpretations are very different. To the wine butler, Yosef says, Yisa paro roshecha v'heshivcha al kanecha. Paro will lift up your head and you will be returned to your station. And to the baker, he says the same thing. Yisa paro es roshecha. Paro will lift up your head. Me'alecha, off your body. Right? The very same phrase. Yisa paro roshecha.
Yeah.
Which is Ki Tisa et rosh b'nei Yisrael. Yeah. It's the same thing. And what the Medrash is saying is that, yes, Ki Tisa, lifting up, means that you are imbuing this person, you are instilling within this person a sense of their own capabilities, their own capacity for greatness. But that comes with a risk. To have a special mission, to have this kind of importance, also means, taking responsibility, and taking responsibility comes with risks. And sometimes it's hard to handle the responsibilities. And I just thought that was such a fascinating connection of Ki Tisa et Rosh with the Yisa Paro es Rosh. And I think it's a lesson that to have a special identity, to be capable of greatness, isn't just, oh, you're a great person. Like, no, it means you have a certain responsibility, you have a certain mission. But I think an ancillary lesson is that we need to have lots of compassion for people who are actually in positions of leadership and responsibility. The best example I can think of right now is Gabayim and Shul and committee chairs for various committees in Shul, because people are volunteering their time and their energy and taking upon themselves to help lead different aspects of what goes on in this building. And sometimes they get complaints, and sometimes people give them a hard time. And I wish people would remember that, first of all, they're volunteers. They're volunteers who are doing this to take on responsibility. It's hard to get it right all the time. It's hard to please everybody all the time. And what we learn from this medrash is that we have to have compassion for them and understanding and patience, appreciation, obviously. And that way we encourage more and more people to step up and take on leadership roles.
That's very beautiful. What you said triggered something, I like a deeper understanding of the pasuk for me also, because the idea is that as they're being counted, you should be counted in a certain way to avoid, essentially, it's as a plague, what we might say in like a contemporary parlance, that you don't want to trigger an ayin hara. So the question is, why does one thing lead to the other? And the idea that many offer to explain the concept of ayin hara is that, what does it mean, the evil eye? It means that somehow your being the center of attention causes Hashem to reassess you. You cause a kind of divine scrutiny.
Right.
And then if you look, if you check the books, you might find, on anyone, you're going to find some issues probably. So the idea is that it's Tisa es Rosh is exactly what you're saying, meaning just like the butler and the baker, like you're being reassessed. When we lift up your head, you're being looked at now. And the question is, that's an amazing opportunity, but it comes with risk. How do we mitigate that risk? We mitigate it by being counted in this particular way, by giving this machzah shekel. So to me, it just ties together all these different strands and gives, I think, a very compelling way to read this pasuk.
Yeah. All right. Good job.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.